Hi, evening.
Hello,
Hi, who are you?
I am Lesley Riddoch.
And what is it you do, Lesley?
Good question. Well, I write columns for the National and the Scotsman. I have been a broadcaster, but I left the BBC 10 years ago. I run a group called Nordic Horizons that takes speakers over from the Nordic countries to speak in the Scottish Parliament. And I'm doing a PhD jointly in Scotland and Norway, to which end I learned Norwegian. I'm sure I'm doing something else, but I can't remember.
Cycling.
Cycling, when I can.
Yes. And do you think Scotland should be an independent country?
Oh, yes.
Okay, now the next question is a bit more complicated. How best do you think you can achieve that?
Well, the kind of quick sprint to the line approach, which we can, in hindsight now, although it seemed a long campaign for 2 years, actually it was a relatively quick sprint to the line approach, because we had come from a situation where we didn't even discuss independence before the SNP came to power in 2007. Actually, it wasn't really discussed then because they were a minority government. And probably much of the electorate was in the same position as a lot of Labour, who were just in complete denial that it had happened for about 3 years. So really, it only became 2011 was the first time people could really get their heads around there was a definite prospect of this happening. In the great scheme of things, that's guy quick. It's also guy party led. I mean, we're talking a lot about Catalonia at the moment. And I remember when their leader, Artur Mas, came here in 2014, and he came and said he was very envious of the Scots because we had an agreement with Westminster about how to have the referendum. It was going to go ahead. And after he'd been here a week, when he left, he said, "You know something, I'm not envious of you anymore because you've got a party, we've got a movement. Exactly. And we'll get there." And I remember that because actually that was the difficulty first time round, that really this was a party-led thing. And I'm not a person who's in a political party. I'm not much of a joiner. It feels to me that it's useful to have folk outside camps being able to say what they think. And I think that dimension had been kind of forgotten about and somewhat underplayed. Since then, the party has gone from strength to strength in terms of membership, and yet it hasn't quite pushed anything over the line. Now, I wonder if people are yet at the stage of thinking that perhaps having a movement is a pretty strong thing. An SNP government has to do a day job, chooses to do a day job, and chooses sometimes not to push independence to the front of that. You could have arguments about that, but you could accept that that's very probably the way the SNP will continue to run. My thinking is that we need a movement. We need a champion for independence on every street in Scotland. We need people who are not going to ebb and flow with elections. We need the same vibe there was in the Yes campaign, where people sink those party enmities and have the experience of overcoming narrow definitions. Because, do you know, if we're going to have an independent country, we need to do that big time, especially with people who voted no. So if we kind of get over our own internal divisions between the SNP, the Greens, people who are in Commonweal, Women for Independence, none of the above, and all the myriad yes groups, plus the hubs that are now setting up. I was at a meeting with 10 different hubs, most of them based around Angus, but actually some folk from Fort William who'd come for the night. That's a 4-hour trip each way. There's incredible strength there, and it's not being harnessed by anybody, including the Scottish Independence Convention at the moment. So my thinking is that's what we need to do. There are some debates about tactics within the Scottish Independence Convention as well that we need to settle, and we then need to find some money, and we need to get ourselves organised that way, so that whatever the SNP does, it's not the end of independence.
Yeah, because I have a different perspective on it a little bit. I felt that there was a movement with the first indie movement, and because I wasn't a member of a party either, I was more in the thought of Scottish independence was really the motivating factor, and I found it was a cross-broad church that actually that approached the issue, and or maybe it was just here. Because
no. I mean, don't get me wrong. That absolutely did happen.
Yes,
and it was actually. Thanks to how rubbish the central Yes campaign was, that there was a blossoming all over Scotland.
Yes, aye.
Everyone was waiting for the cavalry to come with the merchandise, the slogans and everything. And then when they came, they either were unusably straight or they didn't come. And so people began to sort of think, actually, we can do this ourselves.
Exactly.
Now, this is the making of Scotland,
Yes.
is that moment. So no, I absolutely get that. What I was saying about Arturo Mas was the Catalans, when they had a demonstration, stood hand in hand from Barcelona to the Pyrenees.
Yeah.
Right? That is an incredible achievement. When they've recently had demonstrations, they've had 1 million people on the streets.
Yeah.
Now, that's, I don't know whether we can hope to scale up that way, but the movement that we began the last time around has got to become as firm, as recognised, as everywhere as the political party is. Because at the moment, it just ebbs and flows on the goodwill and burnt out time of lots of volunteers who are just getting very tired. And that model of how the movement operates is not going to get us where we need to go. So there's going to have to be a bit of hard talking about cash.
Well, this is our 3rd anniversary in here. Right after the referendum, we decided that we just didn't want to let that energy dissipate. We wanted to keep it focused and wanted to keep it going. And we incorporated ourselves into I think we were one of the first hubs.
We were the first.
When we were the first in Scotland. And I think we're still here. And this is our 3rd anniversary, which is why we're having the kind of party later on. We just wanted to thank everybody for supporting the people out there, the quiet people that has been consistently putting cash in terms of direct debits, and to keep this place open, because there has to be, like you say, a space on the high street where people can see that we're still here, we're not going away, and we can keep it active. And this talk tonight is part of that process. Because I don't think what I really miss is the energy from that first referendum and the spontaneity of it. There was a lot of stuff that we got up to that was almost like guerrilla tactics, and it was so much fun, just doing that, and that aspect of what I missed. And it's almost as though we're waiting for a starting gun to get fired.
Yeah,
And I think there's a lot of people out there that are actually just waiting for that call. Who's going to do it? I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be the SNP. I don't think it should be the SNP. I think it should be, I'd like to see another broad movement again. But to get that fire going, that's where I can't. We need that. I don't know if Brexit will do it. I don't know if May's going to push the agenda to pull more powers back, and then that will probably energise us a bit more.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, nobody can ever look at the events. Like, I mean, I'm doing a talk tonight that will talk a bit about the Nordics, because it's quite useful to get inspiration from our neighbours. And when Norway became independent in 1905, it was over consular representation. Who saw that coming? It could be anything that actually becomes the kind of last straw. But actually, I mean, I think it's fair enough that the starting pistol will be fired by Nicola Sturgeon, because that's her kind of role and dance space. It's just that in the meantime, there's a lot more we could be doing.
Yes.
I mean, the hubs that I was speaking to, a lot of them were really wanting to have a sort of daily rebuttal on their window. But that takes having somebody a lot of them are doing it themselves. It takes somebody cracking it down to get something that's actually accurate, and then people can put it up. They say they can see people walking across the street to come and read it, but it has to be daily. It has to be that rigorous, they felt. And I think that's quite a good idea, because you can argue about mainstream media, or you can get going and make your shop front a front page.
Yes.
Headline wise.
It's what we try to do, but it's not like a daily rebuttal.
No, but then nobody has that's what
the wherewithal. That's
what the Scottish Independence Convention should have the resources to be sending out to everybody.
Right.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of us that are newspaper editors, or have been, at the centre. So we should be able to do that for people.
There's the other aspect, that's what we can do in the front line, on the streets and all that kind of stuff, but there's something that really concerns us in the shop, and that's the background work that has to get done. And we were discussing this afternoon. We need a constitution, we need papers on currency, banking, a central bank, a bank of last resort, our economic strategy. The Commonwealth does some of that. I know that Andy Anderson's done an awful lot here in terms of what they can do with currency. That's what I think we don't see actively being done, especially in terms of constitution. How will Scotland look post-independence? And I'm thinking that we already exist there. It's just getting the ducks in a row to make sure that when that day happens, that everything's ready to go. Mm-hmm. And who should be doing that?
Well, the group that I organised, Nordic Horizons, our next speaker is a woman, Karin Oddsdottir, who comes from Iceland. She's the secretary of the Icelandic crowdsourced constitution, and they decided to set out to write a new constitution themselves without politicians, because they have universal internet and 99% of people are on Facebook. They were able to put up little biogs of themselves. There was something like, I think, 500 people who wanted to be on it. Then people voted online. They got, I think it was 25 in the end. It did include some lawyers, some constitutional lawyers, but a right mix of people. Mm-hmm. And they were either given time off work by their employers, or they took it to come up with this constitution, which picked up ideas from Ecuador about the land having rights, which is a very new way of looking at things. It limited the rights of the president, because that was seen to have been one of the factors involved in the crash.
Yes.
And then they had a problem getting it through Parliament, because the politicians didn't like being sidelined. So their next problem, this is always the way. Mm-hmm. So even in funky Nordic land, you still have this division. So they're however are very active now to try and get it through the Icelandic Parliament this time round. And she is one hell of a young woman. She's a lawyer herself, and she took a year off work to do this.
Great, that's
so
phenomenal.
They're really committed.
Yes.
And I think it's just tedious, sad, last century, straight and unacceptable to have a bunch of lawyers in a room writing a constitution. And that was suggested in the melee of everything happening up to the actual vote in 2014.
Yes, it was.
Alex Salmond did suggest that some lawyers were going to get together for 5 weeks and write a constitution. No. Mm-hmm. You know, I really hope politicians have got that these kind of ways, these top-down ways, if there's one thing that Britishness is about, it's about top-down hierarchical control, a contempt for people's capacity, and an inability to hand control to people so their capacity can be realised. I don't want to go through all the hassle of creating an independent Scotland to discover that we've got people with the same outlook but just a different nationality at the top. Exactly. It needs to be a big, big change.
Do you think that's possible?
Yes.
It's removing the political class completely.
Political classes are kind of useful. They just have to realise they're not everything.
They're not the boss.
They are, in the words of logic, necessary but not sufficient.
Okay. Well, we better close it down there, Lesley. And thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us this evening.
Dandy. Yeah. And, here's to another 30 years.
Absolutely.
For you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.